structures, houses, buildings, or you can completely, cover it completely with or without a heat source. We don't do that commercially. Whole tree cover, it is labor intensive, but if you have just single trees, you might try that. You need to secure it against windy conditions. It can be costly, generally not practical on a large scale, but for the dooryard, you could certainly do something like that, and then put a little heat source, even light bulbs underneath. But you got to keep your trees small. You know? You don't need to have a sugar apple tree above 8 feet. 6 feet. Commercially, you can also, in the dooryard, if you're in an area that has actual soil, you could use sand, or use the actual soil and build a mound halfway up, young tree trunks, and that will protect anything underneath the soil. Problem is, you've got to move the soil to the trunk. The other problem is right after that freeze, the next day or so, you need to remove that soil. You can't leave it there along the trunk, otherwise it's going to rot. Tree wraps, if you're going to use a tree wrap, the easiest tree wrap and the cheapest tree wrap is, you know, the insulating, the batting material for insulating a roof, you know, your ceilings, is you take that material, wear a dust mask, we don't want to be breathing fiberglass, take chicken wire, attach the batting to the chicken wire, cut it in a square about like this, wrap it around the trunk of the tree. And that will slow down, and put the fuzzy side on the inside, right? That will slow down the loss of heat from that trunk. It won't stop it, but it will slow it down. So if it normally takes 2 hours for that trunk to become freezing, it may take 4 hours. By that time, it might be sunrise, and you've made it. Okay. We use high volume irrigation either in the tree or around near the trees. Some people would use a small micro sprinkler and put it up in the tree, and that works to some extent. Or they'll have the sprinkler face up into the canopy, and that works to some extent, but very limited, and not under windy conditions. Wind stress. This occurs anytime there's sufficient, wind speeds are sufficient to cause canopy distortion or damage to the leaves and fruit. It can occur anytime during the year, but in our area, real common during windy season or storm season. So the amount of damage is going to depend upon the site, where the grove is, or where the trees are, the fruit species. Some can take a lot more wind than others. Whether the tree is growing actively or is dormant. Whether the tree has been propagated by grafting, it's on a good rootstock, or air layers, and also your post-cultural practices. Oops, what factors? Okay, so here's wind scar on avocado. It's just from it banging into little branches. There's nothing wrong with that avocado, it just looks like a piece of art, actually. But the other is leaf tattering. You see how the leaves are distorted? And what's happened when those leaves were young, they got beat around by the wind. They banged onto each other and onto the branches, and that killed the cells along the margin of the leaf. So when the leaf grew, it didn't have those cells that were alive, and it just grew and it's distorted. A lot of times people think there's insects or diseases. No, this is wind damage. Here's wind scar on carambola, and you can see right where that fruit has just been banging into that. So again, there's nothing wrong with that fruit. Okay. Here is hurricane damage, and this is a guava tree. These trees were allowed to grow about 14, 15 feet. Well, they're air-layered trees. Excuse me. This doesn't happen if you keep the trees 6, 7 feet high. If you let them get big, they're going home. Pomelo, all the fruits on the ground. Attamoya, this is actually damage caused by flying debris and rocks in our area, and it stripped the bark off the trees. This is lychee, and it just broke off right at the base. It's probably a Mauritius. Mango, defoliation and loss of a lot of limbs. Avocados, you see they fell over. This is a flat planted tree in our area. In other words, just planted on the surface of the ground, not much root depth. This is a tree planted, a mango tree planted in our trenching. Despite that, it pulled it out of that trench. And you can see where the major roots are going, north and south. Of course, this is not from a hurricane, it could be, but this is excessive wind damage to the banana leaf. A little bit of tattering is good. It actually allows the leaves to be more efficient. A lot of tattering, not good. Okay, so you want to plant some of these trees adjacent to protected windbreaks. In some cases you can use a well-established orchard and dig that out and put your plants inside there, or use natural or man-made windbreaks. You want to have equipment, if you're in an area that does have severe weather, you want to have some of this equipment available for after the storm. You're not going to be able to go down to Lowe's and Home Depot after a hurricane and find this stuff easily. So you want to have a little bit of hand. Some of the windbreaks, this is a natural avocado windbreak. This is an old avocado orchard where they went in, or a grove, went in and cut out pieces of it and planted their carambola trees. So they're protected from the wind. This is a man-made windbreak. Carambola trees, $10,000 to $12,000 an acre for the windbreak. This is a natural and man-made. So here's the man-made part, here's the natural windbreak. So the most important pre-storm practice is to implement a tree size program. If you prune your trees, if you keep them small, much less likely to go over. We found in a survey after Andrew, which was a category 5, not a category 4, that if you kept your trees limited height, especially these big trees, avocado, mango, mamey, much less damage, much less falling over. And these other trees, if you keep them small, you're not going to lose them. This is a mature avocado planting maintained at about 12 to 15 feet. This is Dr. Valeri, who couldn't be with us here today. And you can see they kept them at about 15 feet. Didn't lose any trees. Now, lost all the fruit, lost all the leaves, but those trees recovered very quickly. So, really is the key. Thanks very much.
We've time for a few questions.
Okay. Yes.
What's your best suggestion about protecting papaya trees from the fruit fly? Is there like
From the papaya fruit fly. From the papaya fruit fly.
yes?
Yes. Yeah. There's. Okay. Well, there's going to be some differences between commercial and dooryard. If you have papayas in your dooryard, the simplest way is to bag the fruit.
At what point? As soon as it pops out?
No, actually what's happening is,
We're modifying our schedule a little bit to save time later. We're going to start Andrew Kepler's program at 10:30 instead of 10:45. So we'll have time for another 5 or 10 minutes of questions, a 10 to 15 minute break, and then we'll come back.
what's happening is the fruit fly really doesn't attack the fruit until there's a small cavity that it can lay its eggs in. So depending on the variety you're growing, whether it's a big red lady type or a small pear-shaped solo type, you're going to want to bag the fruit, probably when it starts to get, about like this, that long, like this. Because then it's starting to get a cavity and they can poke through and lay eggs. But you can use, people say, I tell people, you can use, depending on the size fruit you're going to have, you can use paper bags. And then they say, yeah, but what about the rain? But I've used paper bags where they get wet, they dry out. They get wet, they dry out. I wouldn't use a plastic bag. Or you can buy one of the more expensive bags, that has the micro pores on it, and things like that. But that's the easiest way. Commercially, people do two things. They will, apply a pesticide. The strategy, though, is that that fruit fly, papaya fruit fly, generally works from the outside of the planting to the inside. So they go ahead, and the only rows that they spray are the outer rows and the first trees at the beginning of the planting and the back of the planting. So it's like a perimeter application. So you kill the fly as it's moving into your planting. The other way is you can take tanglefoot. You guys know what tanglefoot is? That sticky material? It's like glue. And what you do is you buy a plastic ball that's green. Because they know from research that the papaya fruit fly is attracted to the color green. That shouldn't have been hard to figure out. It's attracted to the color green and attracted to the shape round. And so what you do is you take a coat hanger and you poke it through the ball and then dip this in tanglefoot and you go ahead and you stick it up near the top of the plant, into the plant. And what happens is that fruit fly comes along, lands on it, and it's like, you can't get away. It's dead. Simplest way. That does work as well. So there's different ways. Another strategy, if you're in a cool area, is not for the fruit fly, but a cool area that you want to produce papaya. As the papaya grows, it produces fruit, keeps producing fruit. Well, you got to remember, those leaves are feeding all those fruit. So rather than trying to ripen and mature the 20 fruit that it has set, if you're in an area that you're going to be going into the winter, start removing most of the fruit. I'd rather have one or two really nice, mature, sweet fruit rather than a whole bunch of them that aren't going to do anything that winter. So go ahead, when you start getting into September or so, remove most of the fruit and just leave 1, 2, 3 fruit, and then take all these others off and keep them off, and you'll see the fruit that remain will ripen and mature, or will actually they'll ripen and mature much more quickly than if you left all that fruit on the tree.
Okay, the way you talked about removing it looks like you said from the top. Take the top fruit?
I wouldn't let it set any more fruit.
Okay.
I'd take some of the older ones off, so if I had 5 big ones and then 4 medium and 10 small, I'd leave 2 or 3 of the big ones. One here. This is the one I'm going to eat next week. This is the one I'm going to eat in 2 weeks, and 3 weeks, and I get rid of all the other stuff. Yes?
I've seen papaya plantings here that they're being topped. Is that just to keep the fruit easier to pick, or that you're forcing branching, or what?
Yeah. People talk about, can they prune papayas? You can. Papayas will branch. I use the term loosely. They don't form wood. They don't have wood. And really, if you're going to do that, you can make them branch. And so you've got one that's too tall. So here's your plant goal, and it's gotten too tall. You can come in and stump this thing 2, 3, 4, 5 feet. It's going to send out some sprouts. What I would suggest doing is selecting one of the sprouts, just one, and then go ahead, so you get rid of these others. You want to take a heavy-duty post or a piece of bamboo, and you want to support this thing as it goes. All right? If you don't, what's going to happen is once this starts getting fruit, it's going to fall off and break off. And that'll buy you some more time on that plant. Okay? But I wouldn't keep all the sprouts, and you want to be sure to secure the sprout that you choose with a stake or multiple stakes. You'll be much happier when you all of a sudden it's got 5 really nice fruit and you grab it.
On the average, how long does tree live?
Papaya trees can live up to 20 years.
20?
Yep, if insects, diseases, and people don't get to them. But normally, commercially, you're looking at 18 to 24 months. Because again, you know, they get too tall and they can't harvest them efficiently. And really, in most places, I won't say everywhere, I have seen where they were staking the papayas in Taiwan and Hainan. But in that case, what they were doing is they were growing them inside a structure. And instead of planting the plant so it would grow like this, they planted it on an angle, and then they staked it. And this way it took longer for the plant to reach the ceiling than if they had planted it straight up. But again, you have to stake it. Yes?
Jonathan, we saw something like that commercially being grown in Samoa, where the papayas were being grown outside in rows, and they were actually planted at about a 45-degree angle. And so they came up, and as you were saying, but it wasn't inside, it was outside, and they were very successful with it.
Were they staking it?
No.
That's, yeah, I would stake them. I guess if
Okay,
you were
Frank
grow-
said they were.
Oh,
They have been staked.
they had been staked. I was going to say, if you're growing the solo types, you might get away with not staking, but if you're growing the
Right.
fruit de bomba, yeah, just one more question. I guess you're going to take a break, right, Chris?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. I'm sorry, this person here.
So I just were wondering about the fruit fly.